Global interconnectivity has expanded and contracted many times throughout history with the rise and fall of empires and their extended trading routes. Before the advent of industrial technologies, the capacity to maintain some form of global relation was highly costly, and thus the privilege of a tiny minority of any society. The aristocratic women of the Roman Empire could wear fine silk garments imported from China, but the vast majority of people lived out their lives interacting only with their local social, cultural, and physical environment. Tribes, clans, lordships, and other forms of traditional society were organized around a cosmos of local-level interactions and relations that defined the limits to economic and political organization for most of human history. With the advent of industrial technologies, such as the steam engine and later the telephone and radio, the mass of society could communicate with people and travel to places far from their indigenous locality. Tapping into the new energy sources of fossil fuels enabled the sustained expansion in physical connectivity beyond the local. The railroad was one of the truly revolutionary elements of the Industrial Revolution, for not only did it create a new economic dimension, but also it rapidly expanded the geographic mentality of people. For the first time in history, human beings had true mobility over a large geographical area beyond their local community. For the first time, the horizons of ordinary people expanded beyond the local, and it expanded out into a national system of organization that formed over the coming centuries. Economic industrialization went hand in hand with the rise of the modern nation-state, as transportation technologies enabled people to experience a wider geographic area as if it was one. National culture was fostered and sustained through the newspaper, radio, and later the television, which allowed a geographically dispersed population to share their collective set of ideas and experiences. Today, the modern nation-state is the primary macro-scale system of organization in the world. Sovereign states are designed to have supreme and independent authority over a geographic area. All organizations on the regional and the international level operate through or are regulated by the legal machinery of the nation-state. The nation-state has come to represent a whole world of cultural, social, economic, and technological relations on a particular geographical scale, having proved to be the fundamental institutional framework of an industrial society. But whereas the industrial technologies of the railway, automobile, radio, and newspaper enabled the modern state, the advanced technologies of information, communications, and global transportation are interconnecting people and places in ways that go beyond the paradigm of the nation-state. The global connections that these technologies enable, whether they are airline routes, the flow of financial capital, or supply chains, they all start local and travel globally with limited reference to the national level. In parallel with this rise of information technology was a changing economic paradigm. Starting in the late 80s, a new economic and political ideology arose, promoting the idea of the free market, both internal to the nation-state through privatization and external through the reduction in trade barriers, tariffs, and other policies that were designed to reduce the differences between national jurisdictions and enable a global free market. The net result of this, coupled with new technologies, has been a mass increase in global economic exchange, and with this increase in connectivity, an increase in global interdependence. Networks of infrastructure, of telecommunication, of data exchange, of migration, of tourism, of financial flows are expanding out into a new global sphere. But the management of our world has remained, by and large, structured around the nation-state. The result is a growing chasm forming, an ever-growing sphere of activity within and between societies that is unregulated, a void that becomes determined by powerful market actors. As a consequence, at the heart of this evolution in human organization is the question of how can we manage the global economy? How can we manage these global networks in an effective fashion? Today, the case can be easily made that we have not and are not capable of doing this. From financial crisis and offshore tax havens to an incapacity to deal with migration and refugees. Further, environmental challenges such as global warming, cross-boundary water and air pollution, and overfishing of the ocean are directly linked with lack of global governance. To date, neither markets nor public institutions have proven effective at delivering sustainable solutions to the management of the global economy on its different levels. The industrial age macro-scale management structure of the nation-state has not transformed to meet the demands of an emerging set of global networks that require a new form of management structure that is today significantly lacking, and this has many systemic detrimental effects. Global institutions built on the framework of the nation-state, like the World Bank, WTO, IMF, and United Nations, although effective in some ways, are ultimately an incomplete solution to global governance, as they are piecemeal, undemocratic, often ineffective, and have not created the desired results. Today, few people desire the formation of a centralized global government that might be able to manage the global commons in the same way that the nation-state did for national economies. While private actors and markets have evolved into a global structure, such a system of organization without regulation has proved to create huge social and environmental negative externalities that are unsustainable in many ways. The form of globalization that we have developed has turned out to be very unsustainable. While this global interconnectivity is working to disintegrate the social welfare state, in many ways it has not yet replaced it with a viable model on the global level. While large sections of the global economy are still in an industrial mode of organization, at the leading edge, networks are emerging as a new model for organizing human activity without dependence upon geographic boundaries. Until very recently, the only way to achieve large-scale coordination was through centralized closed organizations, but with information technology and online platforms, we now have the actual means to create global-scale organizations capable of coordinating resources and people at an unprecedented scale. This changes the rules of the game, and the conditions for success have changed as power is fast moving from people within hierarchical positions to the design of information networks. Every horizontal connection made across the borders of vertical organizations reduces the resources flowing through those structures. We are going through a massive wave of cross-boundary connectivity that is redirecting the flow of resources both within societies and between them. The resources flowing within vertical organizational structures is diminishing. At the same time, the challenge and complexity of the environment they operate within is increasing, as more and more resources are flowing through information-based networked organizations. This transfer of power from closed organizations to global networks that is taking place as we move from the industrial age to the information age is comparable only to the transfer of power that occurred at the beginning of the modern era from the church and landed nobility to the capitalist classes nation-state and bureaucratic organizations in general. A myriad of overlapping and intersecting global networks are becoming a new organizational structure for humanity in the age of globalization. Networks of trade, of finance, of air transport, of information, of media are now starting to link and coordinate human affairs in new ways. But this transition is far from over, and the outcomes remain hugely undecided.